Story of the Three Birds. This is quite an odd one. Stories are always about threes, aren't they? The story begins, it was 1,000 years ago. No, rather like that. It's very specific. It's 1,000 years ago. When the land was divided into many small states. And this tiny kingdom had a king who loved hunting. And one day he was out hunting with his ministers, and he came across three sisters tending the cows. And as the three men rode by, the eldest sister pointed to the king and said, "If I can't marry him, I will marry no one." And the middle sister pointed to the man who was riding on the king's right and said, "If I can't marry him, I will marry no one." The youngest sister pointed to the man who was riding on the king's left, and she said, "If I can't marry him, I will marry no one." The king was very intrigued by this, and because the women were beautiful and obviously very hard-working, he summoned them to his castle. And when he asked them to tell him what it was that they had said, they all declined. But the king said to the oldest daughter, "Will you marry me? Will you be my wife?" And of course, when a king says that, you can't very well refuse. So the oldest daughter married the king. The second daughter married one minister, the man standing on the king's right, and the youngest daughter married the other minister, the man standing on the king's left. So they should have been happy. But the two younger sisters were always a little envious of their older sister because she was the queen. So after a year, and the queen was with child, and the king had to go away, the queen gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. And the younger sisters took him and threw him in the river. And seeing this, a bird in a tree said, "I will see what I can do." And the two sisters were so frightened by a bird capable of human speech that they ran back to the castle. And when the king returned from his journey, they told him the queen gave birth to a dog. But the little boy was pulled out of the river by a fisherman, for the fisherman and his wife had no children, so they took the boy as their own and brought him up. A year later, the queen gave birth to another boy while her husband was away again. And the younger sisters took him and threw him into the river, where he was rescued by the fisherman and his wife. And again a bird in a tree said, "I will see what I can do." And so the two younger, envy-ridden sisters told the king that the queen had given birth to a dog. Another year passed, another baby, another voyage away for the king. The queen gave birth to a baby girl, and the sisters threw her in the river. But she was rescued by the fisherman and his wife. And the bird in the tree sang out in human tongue, "I will see what I can do." And when the king returned, the sisters told him that the queen had given birth to a cat. So the king had her thrown into prison, where she stayed for many years. And there came a time when the sons, who were by now almost men, went out fishing. But the other boys said, "You foundling, we don't want to play with you." And the oldest son went to the fisherman that he'd always believed was his father and asked him what the boys meant. And so the fisherman and his wife told them the whole story. And the oldest son decided that he would go and look for his father. And he went out along the road and eventually came to another river where an old woman was sitting fishing. And he told the old woman about his quest to find his father. And she said, "How will you get across the river, boy?" And he said, I don't know. So she picked him up and carried him across. And he carried on his way. After some time, his younger brother went to look for him. He missed his brother very much. And he too came to the river where the old woman sat fishing. And she carried him across. And there came a time when their sister, who was worried about her two older brothers because they hadn't returned, followed the same road and came to the same river and met the same old woman sitting by the river fishing. And the girl said, "May the river bless you, may the river give you fish." The old woman said, "You are looking for your brothers. Go across the river, follow the road until you come to a castle. There, on the threshold, is a dog. Ignore it and walk past it. But keep this stout stick with you. As you go through the castle, you will come to an abandoned well with a tree growing beside it. Take a cup of water from the well. When you go back, you will see, hanging by the gate, a bird in a cage. Pick up the cage and come back with a cup of water from the well and the bird in the cage. And as you leave the castle, strike the dog with this stout stick, and all will be well." And the young girl thought this seemed like a strange thing, and she wondered if perhaps the old woman was a little moon-kissed. But she was carried across the river by the old woman, and she clutched in her hand the stout stick that the woman had given her, and she carried on until she came to the castle, and there was the dog. She walked into the castle, and there indeed was a bird in a cage singing merrily. And there was the well with the tree. And she took a cup of water from the well, and there, to her surprise, in the castle were her two brothers. And as she left the castle, she took the stick and beat the dog. And to her amazement, where once there had stood a great grey hound, now there was a young man, richly dressed, who introduced himself as a prince. So the four of them returned back the way they had come. And the old woman was so overjoyed to see them, for now she had been released from the spell which kept her bound to the river. They returned home to find that their mother, the fisherman's wife, and the fisherman was so overjoyed to see them. And the bird in the cage began to sing. And there came a day when the middle child, the second brother, was so restless. He went out a hunting. And the king saw him and said, "Who gave you permission to hunt on these lands?" For he didn't recognise the boy as his true son. And the young man said to his father, "Do you not recognise me, father? I am your true son. My aunts tricked you. It is a terrible thing that my mother is in prison." And of course the king didn't believe him, for he really believed that his wife had given birth to 2 dogs and a cat. But the bird in the cage sang the story of how the children had been thrown in the river. And the king believed the story as it was sung by the bird, and believed the story as it was told by the fisherman and his wife. And so the queen was released from prison, but by this time she was ill and frail. So her daughter gave her the cup of water from the well. And from then on, she recovered. And of course, because this is a fake story, the daughter married the prince who had been released from his enchantment by her courage. And in the original version of this story, the children's aunts, that's the queen's sisters, were burned to death. But perhaps you can make your own ending for this story. And my own little change to the Brothers Grimm version is that the bird was released from the cage and allowed to fly free, as I hope to all of you. And I do hope to see you again for more Grimm stories and lots more fun. Do subscribe, do join the Facebook group, and do keep watching. See you.